Chapter 22, Part 2. Oh Lord, a ghost story. I hated and dreaded the long winter nights when late customers came to the store to sit around the heater, roasting peanuts and trying to best each other in telling lurid tales of ghosts and haunts, banshees and juju, voodoo, and other anti life stories. But a real one that happened to be a real person, and last night it was going to be intolerable. I got up and walked to the window. Mrs. Florida's Mrs. Florida Taylor's funeral in June came on the heels of our final exams. Bailey and Louise and I had done very well and were pleased with ourselves and each other. The summer stretched golden in front of us with promises of picnics and fish fries, blackberry hunts, and croquet games till dark. It would have taken a personal loss to penetrate my sense of well-being. I had met and loved the Bronte sisters and had replaced Kipling's If with Invictus. My friendship with Louise was solidified over Jacks, hopscotch, and confessions, deep and dark, exchanged often after many a cross your heart and you won't tell. I never talked about St. Louis to her, and had generally come to believe that the nightmare, with its attendant guilt and fear, hadn't really happened to me. It happened to a nasty little girl years and years before, who had no chain on me at all. At first, the news that Mrs. Taylor was dead did not strike me as particularly newsy bit of information. As children do, I thought that since she was very old, she had only one thing to do, and that was to die. She was a pleasant enough woman, with her steps made mincing by age and her little hands like gentle claws that liked to touch young skin. Each time she came to the store, I was forced to go up to her while she raked her yellow nails down my cheek. You sure got a pretty complexion. It was a rare compliment in a world of very few such words of praise, so it balanced being touched by the dry fingers. You going to the funeral, sister? Mama wasn't asking a question. Mama said, You goin' 'cause Sister Taylor thought so much of you. She left you her yellow brooch. She wouldn't say gold because it wasn't. She told Brother Taylor, I want Sister Henderson's grandbaby to have my gold brooch, so you'll have to go. I had followed a few coffins up the hill from the church to the cemetery, but because Mama said I was tender-hearted, I had never been forced to sit through a funeral service. At 11 years old, death is more unreal than frightening. It seemed a waste of a good afternoon to sit in church for a silly old brooch, which was not only not gold, but was too old for me to wear. But if Mama said I had to go, it was certain that I would be there. The mourners on the front benches sat in a blue serge, black crepe dress gloom. A funeral hymn made its way around the church tediously but successfully. It eased into the heart of every gay thought, into the care of each happy memory, shattering the light and hopeful. On the other side of Jordan, there is a peace for the weary, there is a peace for me. The inevitable destination of all living things seemed but a short step away. I had never considered before that dying, death, dead, passed away were words and phrases that might be even faintly connected with me. But on that onerous day, oppressed beyond relief, my own mortality was borne in upon me on sluggish tides of doom. No sooner had the mournful song run its course than the minister took to the altar and delivered a sermon that in my state gave little comfort. Its subject was, "Thou art my good and faithful servant with whom I am well pleased." His voice enweaved itself through the somber vapors left by the dirge. In a monotonous tone, he warned the listeners that this day might be your last, and the best insurance against dying a sinner was to make yourself right with God, so that on the fateful day he would say, "Thou art my good and faithful servant, with whom I am well pleased." After he had put the fear of the cold grave under our skins, he began to speak of Mrs. Taylor, a godly woman who gave to the poor, visited the sick, tithed to the church, and in general lived a life of goodliness. At this point, he began to talk directly to the coffin, which I had noticed upon my arrival and had studiously avoided thereafter. "I hungered, and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me to drink. I was sick, and you visited me. In prison, and you left me not. Inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of one of these, you have done it unto me." He bounded off the dais and approached the velvet gray box. With an imperious gesture, he snatched the gray cloth off the open flap and gazed downward into the mystery. "Sleep on, thy graceful soul, till Christ calls you to come forth into his bright heaven." He continued speaking directly to the dead woman, and I half wished she would rise up and answer him, offended by the coarseness of his approach. A scream burst from Mr. Taylor. He stood up suddenly and lengthened his arms toward the minister, the coffin, and his wife's corpse. For a long minute he hovered, his back to the church, as the instructive words kept falling around the room, rich with promise, full with warnings. Mamma and other ladies caught him in time to bring him back to the bench, where he quickly folded upon himself like a Breer Rabbit rag doll. Mr. Taylor and the high church officials were the first to file around the bier to wave farewell to the departed and get a glimpse of what lay in store for all men. Then, on a heavy feet made more ponderous by the guilt of the living viewing the dead, the adult church marched up to the coffin and back to their seats, their faces, which showed apprehension before reaching the coffin, revealed on the way down the opposite aisle a final confirmation of their fears. Watching them was a little like peeping through a window when the shade is not drawn flush. Although I didn't try, it was impossible not to record their roles in the drama. And then a black-dressed usher stuck her hand out woodenly toward the children's rows. There was the shifty rustling of unreadiness, but finally a boy of 14 led us off, and I dared not hang back, as much as I hated the idea of seeing Mrs. Taylor. Up the aisle, the moans and screams merged with the sickening smell of woolen black clothes worn in summer weather and green leaves wilted over yellow flowers. I couldn't distinguish whether I was smelling the clutching sound of misery or hearing the clawing odor of death. It would have been easier to see her through the gauze, but instead I looked down on the stark face that seemed suddenly so empty and evil. It knew secrets that I never wanted to share. The cheeks had fallen back to the ears, and a solicitous mortician had put lipstick on the black mouth. The scent of decay was sweet and clasping. It groped for life with a hunger both greedy and hateful, but it was hypnotic. I wanted to be off. My shoes had glued themselves to the floor, and I had to hold onto the sides of the coffin to remain standing. The unexpected halt in the moving line caused the children to press upon each other, and whispers of no small intent reached my ears. "Move along, sister, move along." It was Mamma. Her voice tugged at my will, and someone pushed from the rear, so I was freed. Instantly, I surrendered myself to the grimness of death. The change it had been able to effect in Mrs. Taylor showed that its strength could not be resisted. Her high pitched voice, which parted the air in the store, was forever stilled, and the plump brown face had been deflated and patted flat like a cow's odorous dropping. The coffin was carried on a horse drawn wagon to the cemetery, and all the way I communed with death's angels, questioning their choice of time, place, and person. For the first time, the burial ceremony had meaning for me. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. It was certain that Mrs. Taylor was returning to the earth from whence she came. In face, upon considering, I concluded that she had looked like a mud baby lying on the white satin of her velvet coffin. A mud baby, molded into form by creative children on a rainy day, soon to run back into the loose earth. The memory of the grim ceremony had been so real to me that I was surprised to look up and see Mama and Uncle Willie eating by the stove. They were neither anxious nor hesitant, as if they knew a man has to say what he has to say. But I didn't want to hear any of it, and the wind, allying itself with me, threatened the chinaberry tree outside the back door. Last night, after I said my prayers, I lay down on the bed. Well, you know it's the same bed she died on. Oh, if he'd shut up. Mama said, "Sister, sit down and eat your soup. Cold night like this, you need something hot in your stomach. Go on, Brother Taylor, please." I sat down as near Bailey as possible. Well, something told me to open my eyes. "What kind of something?" Mama asked, not laying down her spoon. "Yes, sir," Uncle Willie explained. "There can be a good something and there can be a bad something. Well, I wasn't sure, so I figured better open 'em, 'cause it could have been, well, either one. I did, and the first thing, I saw little baby Angel. It was just as fat as a butterball and laughing eyes, blue, blue, blue.